Welcome to the Rabia and Sana show. We're two Desi girls reinventing cultural norms with love to make difficult conversations easier to help you take courageous steps faster.
Whether you feel like a misfit now or have been breaking the standards, this podcast is for you, for the adults, the young. Come as you be and become your authentic self as you desire. Let's go reinvent some cultural norms together.
Hello everyone, I am Rabia Paracha. I have been a rebel without a cause for most of my life until I discovered my purpose to empower women to empower themselves. And that led me down a rabbit hole to become a life coach from CTI Coactive Coaching. And today I'm a mind and life power coach who helps people break free of their limiting cultural beliefs to find the life they love and the love of their life.
Hello everyone, I am Sana. I am from New Jersey, a Pakistani American. Professionally, I work in the clinical research field. And personally, I have always had this purpose of empowering women of South Asian culture to be able to live the life that they want to live and be true to themselves instead of what the culture expects them to be. And so here I am pursuing that purpose, and I am also studying to become a life coach. Let's get started.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Rabia and Sana Show podcast, the place where we talk about reinventing cultural norms. I'm your co-host, Rabia Paracha.
And I'm Sana Shah. Hello, everyone. Today we have a special episode, and we are going to be talking about peace. We have some amazing guests on this episode. We have Shanta Sundarason, Peter Deboran, and Ali Chatha. They are the organizers of a peace vigil in Rabia's hometown of Markham, Ontario. Thank you so much for joining. Before we dive into our conversation, can you please briefly introduce yourselves?
Sure. Hi, I'm Shanta Sundarason, and I live in Unionville in Markham, and I run a nonprofit, a social justice group, where I empower youth and help educate and teach them to advocate for themselves to make positive changes moving forward.
Hi, everyone. My name is Peter Deboran. I'm from Thornhill, Markham, just north of Toronto in Ontario. I think perhaps the most salient thing I can say at this point is that I've spent the last 10 years as a school administrator, vice principal, and principal with the largest public school board in Canada, which makes it one of the largest public school boards really in North America. And obviously spent a lot of my time working with a huge multicultural population with kids all over the world, working really very much to help many of them understand what they will need, the kinds of knowledge and skills they'll need to thrive in a very multicultural, very urban society such as ours, where everyone has huge ambitions. Like Shanta and like Ali, who is going to speak to you in a second, I think perhaps all of us have certain common threads in that we are all very much invested in our communities. We're all very much community activists. We've all been on various local nonprofit and community boards for the last, I'm going to say at least a decade. I'm a little older than the others, so I'm going to say at least a decade. Okay. And Ali?
Thanks, Peter. Hello, everyone. My name is Ali Chatha, also from Markham. I've been a proud resident. I'm a proud resident for 16 years. Professionally, I'm a working professional in the field of policy and project management, currently doing some consulting work with a GTA college. And yeah, as Peter mentioned, when I'm not doing that, my activities are surrounded really around community, youth, in that area, because that's really my interest. And obviously, as somebody who's grown up here in Canada and came to this country when I was relatively young, I've had my sort of fair share of cultural challenges or things to kind of overcome, and so it's been a wonderful journey to kind of get to the place where I am. So very nice to be here with all of you.
You are so amazing. It's so good to learn more about all of you. Last month when we all met, it was amazing to know that you had organized a peace vigil after this war had erupted on October 7th, when there's so much divisiveness, that I heard about a peace vigil that's bringing a community together. And so I was really taken by that. And I was thinking about arranging one myself. While this whole world is divided, you are all bringing the community together to create peace. I was really inspired by that.
when I heard from Rabia on this peace vigil that you guys did and how early on in this whole thing you had done it. And it's like what everyone else was doing. It's something that we really needed to have with the different community. So that was really inspiring for me to hear that. So for our listeners, we are going to have an announcement related to this about an upcoming event that we are going to share at the end of the episode. So please continue to listen on. So my question for you is, how did this idea come to you? What made you guys get together and organize a peace vigil?
Well, maybe I can start. There was quite a bit of unrest within the community. We've got a lot of people of different faiths that live in Markham. We do have many Jewish people. We have a lot of Muslims. We have a lot of people from all over the world. And I started to see quite a bit of discontent. There were different sorts of posters being put up all over the village, and not in a very respectful way. And it was really causing anger amongst the different groups of people. And I thought that we really needed to do something to bring the majority of the people together, because it's really the politicians and the leaders of various countries that were embroiled in this, and not the citizens themselves. And the only way to bring people together is to actually come out and show that we are united. And it was important to me anyway to do that. And I thought the only way to do this is to organize something publicly that will show that the community stood with each other. They stood with not only the people of Israel, but also the people of Palestine, and that people of all walks of life were being affected by this. There were people losing jobs. There are people at universities that just, can't say certain things that they want to for fear of, being labeled. And so I reached out to my friends, Ali and Peter, and they didn't even think twice about stepping in and helping.
For my part, I will say that I'm not as, in terms of what Shanta is thinking, the large picture, I wasn't even there yet. The truth is, although my career has been about trying to remain objective and balanced while two kids are yelling at each other, or parents are barging into your office, or teachers saying, I can't take these kids, or whatever it is, it was always a sense of how can I bring people together harmoniously? And I used to say to others, don't let other people's anger or whatever impact your good time and your happiness. That was like sort of a mantra in my head. Always keep it cool, always enjoy, always find a way to be pleasant. And yet in this particular case, most of the days I don't worry too much about the news. It's car accidents, it's fires, it's a shooting. That does not help my life. So, but yet when this occurred, I was very, very seriously affected. I was upset. I was frustrated. I was angry. I was sad. I was just going crazy. And I was writing letters to the media. I was writing letters to politicians. I was responding to people on Facebook and LinkedIn and just saying, and it was taking a toll on me, which I found really, I was surprised at what it did to me. And I knew that I needed a different way of tackling this. And it so happens that what Shanta did and said at that time, for me, I knew it was going to be not only important to the community as a whole for all the very good reasons that Shanta said, but also therapeutic for me too, to actually be able to be active in a positive way and not sort of spin into that same laundry cycle of anger and retribution.
And how about you, Ali? What was your reasoning behind that?
Yeah, I know. Certainly, I think, of course, Shanta was really the person I think who kind of kickstarted this and spoke to Peter and I as well. And I wanted to step in and join the effort because for similar reasons, because I think this issue that has now unfortunately, gone on over 2 months, even at that time when we held the vigil, it had gone on for too long. And what was not happening, unfortunately, which should be happening at a time like this, is for people who are maybe disagreeing or maybe who on the two opposing sides, that there be opportunities for them to, at the very least, come together and have a conversation. And that was not happening. So this was an opportunity to create a space, a healing space, to say that, hey, we recognize and we understand there's a lot of differences. We understand that there's a lot of pain and suffering behind all of this. But we also understand that there is a need for us to come together and actually meet with each other, have a conversation with each other. And frankly, this is what Markham, this is what Canada is all about. In difficult times, we do reach out to each other. And frankly, that is how problems are resolved, because the longer we stay away from each other, the more misunderstandings will happen. And as a result, we will not get to a conclusion or a solution. So it was really an opportunity to bring all communities together, communities of faith, including Muslim, Jewish, Hindu, Christian, and others. And just to say, hey, we're all in this together. A human life is a human life. And it saddens us that, there's a loss of any human life, but we're standing here for peace. And one of the things I remember saying was, I wish we didn't actually have to do that, or I wish we didn't have to be here today. But we were there doing the next best thing, which is basically bringing people together when so many people are going apart.
Right. That's a great segue into what I want to ask all of you next. And that is, Ali, when you began your speech, you began with Rumi's poem, The Great Wagon.
Yes.
Out beyond the field of wrongdoing and right doing, I'll meet you there. How do you think we can find peace? Now, this is to all of you. How do you think we can find peace without talking about right and wrong?
I think in order for us to start to talk about peace, in my opinion, it can't start from right and wrong, because I think right and wrong gets into sort of judgment, of what's happening. And it's not to say that right and wrong doesn't need to be kind of distilled. But I think if we're looking for peace, and the reason why I like Rumi's poem so much is because it takes me away from any sense of, conflict or debate. Because the reality is, as far as this issue is concerned, for example, depending on whom you ask, their right and wrong may be very different than another person you ask, right? So we don't unfortunately have an objective truth in often cases in political issues, right? Because people have their own version of the truth. And I think in cases like that, we have to create spaces and we have to have conversations, which I think speak to a higher purpose of us as human beings. Because before we are, politicians or political animals, we're human beings. And we need to recognize and understand that, there's a better way to solve issues. And, you can't solve something by force, which needs to be resolved through conversation. So I think there's certainly, when it comes to serving justice, justice requires that we actually look into what happened and what is right and what is wrong. And there does need to be accountability, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to bringing communities together in the long term, we do also have to create rooms for some forgiveness, for broader understanding, and having a conversation that is higher level than mere politics.
Very interesting. So take away the right and the wrong, the blame game and the judgment out of it, just so the communities can come together and be able to talk to each other, because this right and wrong has created so much division and so much anger and hatred over I'm right and you're wrong, and then leads into so many other issues. And I really like that. But then again, when it comes down to a solution, right? Finding a solution, I feel like the need for right and wrong comes because how do you get to a solution also then without having a right and wrong? That's just what the question that's coming to me. Well, please, Shanta and Peter, if you would like to answer Rabia's original question.
Sure. Honestly, I think that's a really difficult path to go down. And I think the only real answer there is more humanity, because I think if everyone can reach out a hand in hope and love, which is what we tried to do with the Peace Vigil, right? It was about hope, and it was about bringing people together, irregardless of whatever. And I think just a hand of friendship, a hug, and humanity. We are lacking in humanity, and it seems to be just disappearing more and more each year. That's the only way we're going to be able to do it, is when we have some real human beings where humanity comes first in leadership, will we be able to solve these problems? I don't see it any other way.
Yeah, in thinking about that word humanity, there's a saying about there are 10 million stories in a big city kind of thing. And really what it means is that you have 10 million people in New York and more now, of course, but every single person has a story and every single person has their own truth. And, we're looking at a situation that has gone back generations. Each one of those people, whatever they've been told about what happened with their grandparents or great grandparents or their children, it's like on one level, it is about the stories people tell and the experiences they've had and how they've experienced what they feel about that. But on another level, it's what's been sort of ingested by them and internalized by them, so that maybe that opportunity to become friends, or at least to have mutual respect and work with each other harmoniously, doesn't really happen in a way that people wish it could. I'm thinking right now, it's almost as if, it's like a fire, one generation, let's say the parent leaves these coals behind, and from those coals, it starts the flame in the next generation, right? And so it really hinders that opportunity to reach a hand or a speech. I think this is where, for once, really the idea of inquiry and law and the ability for people to be heard and their stories given some sense of validation, so that people feel some sense of peace. And this is one thing I've learned from a long time ago. I think people, it doesn't matter if I'm right and the other person is wrong or vice versa. No one is going to change unless they want to change. Yeah. And so at the end of the day, are they willing to open their minds and hearts and really look out across that green zone or whatever, wherever we are in the world, and say, do I see another human being there? Do I see somebody who simply wants their own home? Somebody who loves them, who wants to protect their own children, who wants to put food on the table, right? And I believe that that's where most people in the world are, including the people in Palestine and the people in Israel. Most people want to be able to just celebrate their birthday parties, right? Celebrate, I'm thinking now even about the time of year that we're in. And I think, given the dateline on this show, we'll know that winter has arrived and is certainly coming very, very close to us here in Canada before you guys and down in the States. And no matter what background you are, people are going to stop in the next week or 2 or 3 weeks, and they're going to use that time to reconnect with their close friends and with their families, and really express joy and gratitude for being with each other. And they're going to give gifts. My wife is of Sikh background, although born here. And when I married her, I was not expecting necessarily for us to celebrate Christmas. And it didn't matter to me. I grew up in a house that celebrated Christmas. I wanted to, I knew who I was marrying into, and she loved Christmas and always wanted to do that. So in the end, my family, my extended Trinidadian family, and I'm going to say this while we're in this world right now, Trinidad was once considered the most multicultural country in the world, until apparently Toronto took that distinction somewhere in the 70s and 80s. But everywhere is multicultural now, isn't it? I mean, Hong Kong, wherever you are in the world, New York, Toronto, Singapore, people are multicultural, and they're going to become friends and share in each other's traditions and enjoy their foods. So what I'm saying, to distill this down to the very essence of it, is, number one, I think people need to have their stories heard rather than receiving constant pushback. They need to feel that they've been listened to and that there's a decisions being made around it based on genuine care and respect. And like Shanta and like Ali, we are not the so-called leaders who are supposed to be exhibiting certain kinds of behavior. We have to rely on ourselves to reach that hand out. And in the same way that I knew it would be therapeutic for me, I knew that all the dozens and the amount of people who came by, and people who came by after inquiring about why the candles were there and all that, were genuinely interested and genuinely, I think, moved by the sentiment that we had behind it.
And if I may add something quickly, so when I say, I personally don't mean that, we shouldn't talk about, or we don't need to talk about right and wrong. For me, I think it's just not the first step, because I think right and wrong ought to be discussed at the table, and not in the battlefield. And I think right now, given where we stand and where people's mindsets are, and unfortunately where we are, given, the grief and the tragedy that's taking place right before our eyes, we're not at the table just yet, right? But so for us, I think the first step is, how do we find ways to bring people to the table first and foremost? And then we can talk about right and wrong, because you couldn't dispense justice if we didn't talk about right and wrong. And I think the vigil, for example, was a prime example of, hey, before we get into the right and wrong debate, can we just come together and just hold hands and pray together? Because you know what? That is something we all have in common. So can we, for a moment, put aside right and wrong and focus on what is common amongst us? And frankly speaking, there's a lot. Right, religiously, and in so many other contexts as well.
Absolutely. And
that vigil, one thing that there was a lot of was silence. There was no communication, and silence is a big space to create that healing. Silence and light, the two things that were very much present in that healing process. And when you were speaking about humanity, Shanta, and Peter, you and Ali brought up healing. And when we begin with shared humanity and speak from compassion for each other and empathy, I think if we find our healing and we communicate from that place, and we start there, not end there, of course, that's the beginning point. How do you remove politics from that conversation? Because, it's like we're divided. I think everyone's torn right now. So my question to you is, in this space, how do we separate politics from humanity and come together as a community? And you did it beautifully in the vigil. But what's the next step?
If you don't mind, I'm just going to jump in very quickly and say, look, I think every single thing we do in life is political. The whole idea of politics, whether from government or oneself, is about what is the view that we have of the world, and how do we, from that, distill the values and the standards that we have in terms of moving forward. So for me, the vigil is political. A very poignant form of politism, right, of how we want to move forward. We're trying to say that there are different ways to address issues, of which this is for us. And I think Ali has said it so well earlier tonight. But the idea is that by coming together, everyone was welcome, and there were people of all different faiths there. And one of the things, I don't know if you remember, Rabia, the Anglican minister, when she spoke about being in Palestine and Israel, which part that she was in, and talked about working with Muslims, Christians, and Jews in the same area, who all interacted together harmoniously, prayed together, worked together for the benefit of their region, Gaza area and Palestine and all that. And that was a beautiful thing. I think it was a lovely thing for her to say, because she's just returned from that region and has these wonderful memories of these people who are living and working together. And I think at the end of the day, that in itself is a highly political statement to say that people can, when they wish to and when they want to, based on these, what some people might feel are very different values. Oh my God, Muslim, Jewish, Christian, or these people. No, the true understanding, and there's beauty in every single religion, the true understanding is really to move towards that idea of peace and living harmoniously. And I'm going to repeat that word tonight because I think it's so important. The idea that this is what people at the end of the day really want. That idea to live peacefully with each other, so they can have joy and laughter with each other. Maybe share some good meals.
Food is definitely a great place at the dinner table. Yeah.
Well, I think what I will tell you about the peace vigil, since this is really what started this conversation, is that I did reach out and I did invite all the local politicians. But one thing I did say was that if they were to come, they were to come in their capacity as a community member, and politics was to be kept out of this peace vigil. I will tell you, not a single one of them turned up. So for me, keeping politics out of something like this is very important to me. And I know it's difficult to do, but I will always ensure that I try and do that to the very best of my ability, because I think it's politicians that have caused the issue. They cause many issues, unfortunately, around the world, but we are where we are today with this issue between Palestine and Israel because of politics. And it is, I think, important for us, especially for me, when I run any kind of peace initiatives, to ensure that politics is kept out of it in any and every possible way, and that it's about the people coming together.
I just want to underline what you both said. I think that's so profound, that what the politicians want is what they want. It's not what the people want. The people just want to live together in peace and have their birthday parties and go live their lives. They're just sick of all of this. They just want to live their lives, but the politicians want what they want. And I loved what you said, Peter, about the peace vigil is at the same time political, because we're sending a message to the politicians by coming together in peace and harmony. We just want to live. We just want to be at peace. Stop bothering us and stop making all these decisions that you think are right.
Yeah, to Shanta's point, and obviously the listening audience or the viewing audience will understand we have two slightly different interpretations of politics, but really it's the same, if you know what I mean. And it's what I'm asking is to transcend bias, transcend a particular side to this, a winner or a loser, or you're wrong and I'm right, but really to look at the greater humanity. And at the end of the day, some of the things that I thought was fascinating, in, let's say 10 or 20 years ago, the whole idea of race purity used to be part of the common lexicon out there. And I used to just laugh, because anybody who's taken a cursory glance of any book, any of the whole world, there were no borders, there were no border guards, there were no passports 1,000 or 2 or 3 or 4,000 years ago. People just wandered into region to region to region. And at the end of the day, even in that area of modern day, the state of Israel, which itself is a body politic created by laws and people who had control and power at the time, there's really, for people to talk about purity, no, you're looking at any region in the world where people lived and worked. That area, for example, was once, a Greek kingdom. It was a Roman empire. It was an Egyptian empire. It was an Ottoman empire. There were many empires. Empires come and go, but the people were still there. And those people have mixed. They've mixed foods, and they've mixed languages, and they've mixed with each other. It's only natural. So people today can look around and say, Turkish or Lebanese or whatever, let's go for Thai tonight. But things have been in confluence and influenced by generations and generations of cultures coming and going. And we've all been, to a large extent, enriched by it. And people need to understand at the end of the day that there's essentially human. That's all there is. That's the race. I hope you guys like when I did that for dramatic sake. I didn't plan it back, and it happened.
If I may add, so I think, Rabia, to your question, how do we take up politics? I mean, I almost have two contradictory answers to it. But the first one, I think the simple and maybe a naive answer is we put, the humanity of people first before politics, right? But I think that's an oversimplification. But it gets to the point of the thing. And I do agree with what's been shared in terms of politics kind of dirties the game oftentimes. But I think the politics Shanta is referring to is basically, I understand. I think we all understand without we needing to. But it's basically that nonsensical, self-interested, one-sided, biased, all which right. So for me, politics personally is a very sacred thing, right? Because it has to do with governing people, right? And I think and it's supposed to be, and it is actually a privilege to serve as a political leader. And I would say that while I think politicians are certainly the problem, sadly, I think the rot is deeper than that, But certainly politicians tend to be the folks who are on stage and get to kind of make those calls and decisions. But I think what's really important to also ask is maybe it's less about extracting politics from the conversation and maybe using politics in the right way, right? So asking ourselves, okay, to what end am I using this politics? Because politics isn't going anywhere, right? And I think, Peter, you mentioned that everything we do, frankly speaking, or most of what we do is political. So politics is really the tool that we have at our disposal, right? And that we said, and so really it's up to us, like, how do we use that tool, right? And if we're misusing it and misapplying it, then we need to kind of take a step back. But in the meantime, I think we can certainly make sure and maybe remind people that please don't let your politics color your humanity, right? You don't get into this political tribalism where you need to ask who is the victim before you tell me whether you feel grief or joy, right? So I think that's a really state of affairs when those kind of conversations happen.
Or for someone to tell you which side you're supposed to be on publicly.
Yes.
When you should have a brain and be able to understand right and wrong yourself.
The word humanity has been brought up a lot. We've all used it in various ways. So my question is, what is humanity?
Who wants to go first?
Humanity is forgiveness, it's kindness, it's hope, it's offering a hand to somebody you don't know, you may never have met, right? That's humanity. I feel very sad living in Canada, living in North America at the moment, because I've seen zero humanity. Humanity is stopping other people from being killed, right? From being harmed. To me, that's humanity. And I think part of the reason I had to do this peace vigil was because I was just so hurt and so upset and so angry living in a part of the world where I felt there was no humanity. Humanity is not giving the go-ahead to continue to harm somebody else. That's what humanity is to me. And I'm still very sad and hurt about where I live right now, because I feel that there has been zero humanity.
We expected better. We expected better in Canada. It sends a message out to all of us and to the whole world. Look at us. We're a democracy. We have free speech. We have excellent schools where supposedly critical thinking skills are taking place. And it's something I've had a challenge with for a long time because I don't believe that critical thinking skills are taking place as well as they should.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I think one of the reasons I perhaps like Shanta so much is that when we talk about humanity, she is going to that positive aspect of the pendulum. And for me, unfortunately, that is something that I want to strive for all my life. It is something I want to influence the people around me and my own children and whomever I can by the way I behave and the way I face the world. I hope it's a good thing all the time. And I ask the universe to help me out practically every day. Give me direction. Tell me what it is I need to do to be the kind of person I should be, of integrity and honor. That said, though, what are we all at the end of the day? It was only 3 or 4 million years ago we became Homo sapiens. I mean, the branch of humanity before that picked up sticks and sharpened it and poked each other, And then suddenly, within the last 3 million years, we went from domesticating a cow and taming a dog. And then we have a guy with SpaceX forgetting the Earth and going to Mars, which has no flowers, no grass, no water. And he couldn't care less. That's what he wants. So to me, humanity is still a lot of things, which is I need food. I need a mate. I need to make children. I need shelter, be it a cave or whatever. But what we're aspiring to all the time, what we are trying to in 2023 and 1993 still is every word that Shanta has said, the idea of benevolence, the idea of goodwill towards our fellow human beings, the idea of care and respect. And for me, I know Ali will always wrap it up more beautiful than me. So, but for me, it's really always striving towards that so that I can enjoy time with people and not be caught up with what I would call blatant and obvious injustice in the world. It is painful. So one thing I'm going to end with in this particular section, I'm going to say is what I do know about human beings, men and women, no matter what people think about gender, is that we are beautiful, kind, timid, people. But when we receive hurt, when hurt comes to us, or when we're the victims of injustice, that's when we have to become harder and harder and harder. And that is really unfortunate, because I think the job of a beautiful society, the just society, should be reminding people or protecting and looking after people and showing them respect so that we can still retain that beautiful innocence that so many peoples in the world once had. Do I sound like a teacher?
Can tell we have a principle amongst us. I honestly don't have an answer, but I think in a simple, if I could sort of sum it up, I think humanity comes down to what we try to teach our children, right? It's basically seeing yourself in the other, right? Seeing your maybe family in the other family, right? So when you see, for example, destruction happening as you turn your TV screen on, right? And you forget about the conversation and forget about for a moment why this is happening, just for a moment, why it's happening, and just kind of sitting with the fact that here you have a family or a young man or a young woman or whoever it may be suffering as a result of something that's happening, right? Because of a debate that's taking place, because of some ill actions that have taken place, right? But I think really it's about empathy, and it's really understanding that we have more in common than we are different, and really trying our best to see yourself in the other person, and then maybe acting accordingly. So don't have an answer, but that's kind of how I see it.
The only thing I can say is that unfortunately the debate has so many ramifications. And part of that debate, unfortunately, to me, is religious. And while we are in a world that's supposedly modern, the idea of religion to so many people puts them right back 200 years, 400 years, 1,000 years. And many people fail to understand. And that is because they genuinely believe in, well, you know what? I'm going to say what I got to say. I am a Canadian citizen. I have a right to my opinion and my speech. I'm going to say I believe that religion is still a matter of faith. I'm not entirely sure there's any proof that a man called Jesus actually walked on water. And what little I know of Noah's Ark, it's actually the story of Gilgamesh, which is something that predates the Judaic, Christian, Arabic, Muslim faith. That was the Epic of Gilgamesh. That's the 40 days and 40 nights, right? And there are other things that have informed these religions because, again, people walked into each other's territories and whatever and had food with them and picked a god, right?
Yeah.
So, and that was okay. But unfortunately, people who should know better are still believing, well, this is our religion says it's ours. But at the end of the day, I'm not disputing that you believe that. What I'm saying is there were other people there too. And really, it comes down to, guys, how can we find a way? Because we're educated people. It is the modern world. In this new world, at least 80% of the world population is reasonably well educated, as opposed to 100 years ago, which may have been 50%, and certainly 400 years ago, 5%. So people have the ability now to actually read history, read archaeology, read sociology and cultures, not just one particular book. If you're even reading the book because you're too busy listening to some guy telling you or some girl telling you what the book says, right? So I am reasonably religious. I know that I'm not as religious as others, but I think there is merit in what I'm saying, that at the end of the day, people are there and were there, and people need to understand that there is, sides to every story. But at the end of the day, people are human, and there's no need to keep on pounding and pounding and pounding. Rather, let's stop and find ways and seek help if we need to. And here's something from my own history as well too. When I couldn't find ways to use my authority as a school principal to seek peace of parents fighting in the parking lot or whatever it might be, then I'd say, you know what, why don't we look at the policies? Why don't we look at the superintendent? We find a higher court, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And this is what I think people are talking about. I think in terms of what we need to do today is we need to continue to hold those vigils. We need to continue to write letters. We need to continue to trust our own ideas of conscience and work with people so that we can resolve this in a beautiful way, the way it should be. But at the same time, with the expectation that later on there will be some sort of court that people are not denigrating, like the UN. And before the UN was it the League of Nations? I think the League of Nations. And that was destroyed in after World War I. We put the UN together because we did not want wars like that again. And yet now we see people making fun of the UN all the time. Well, if you don't give it any money and you don't give it the resources it needs, it can't enact peace. It can't make peace happen. And that's unfortunate. We do need to still believe in certain kinds of institutions, if not politicians, but certainly institutions which must run on policies and processes.
There's a lot of reform that's needed right now in a lot of these systems that are pre-existing the situation. And I think the reform that's needed is actually coming to surface now. We're realizing where the discrepancies have been, and sometimes these situations, I think, happen for this reason, to awaken humanity. And I think that's one of the reasons, sadly, the cost of, awakening humanity has a big price tag. So that's the sad part.
Well said. We're only willing to really change when the SH whatever star hits the fan, right? When there's real pain, we actually say, okay, you know what, we need to figure out something else here because this isn't working. And that's exactly true. You look at maybe grandparents who went through World War II, and they will tell you they don't want anything to do with war. There has to be another way because they remember what that was like.
Right. And something you said, Peter, about, the intergenerational trauma that is passed on from generations to generations. And there's the one side of humanity, the healed humanity, that says never again for anyone. And then there's the other side of humanity that's still healing, that's still unhealed. And so I really think that this conflict is between the healed and unhealed. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I think that's very true, for sure. And the sad part is there's going to be so many more in the years to come that will be unhealed from what's going on right now. And that's unfortunately that's what started and caused this in the first place, was so many people have been and are still unhealed. And so I think it's going to be quite a few years before we see real peace.
That trauma has no boundaries, right? And it doesn't discriminate. And I don't know who said it, but as they say, in darkness, we're all the same. So when we get to a place where we have things like intergenerational trauma, and unfortunately this particular issue right now is full of it. God knows how long and when that will, if ever, will be healed, because majority of the population there is, or at least half of it is children. And for children, and we know from anything from trauma that, your childhood, what happens in your childhood sticks with you for the rest of your life. So there will be a lot of intergenerational trauma. And frankly, it's going to be on both sides, because both sides have gone through a lot of tragedy. And frankly, it's one of those things which are not being discussed. And it will probably get overlooked, and it'll fall on the shoulders of community community folks, community organizations, international efforts to kind of bring something to the table to begin the process of healing. But I think for anything to heal, I think we need to kind of go back into the root cause. If we're talking about this particular issue, I think one thing that has gotten lost in this conversation is we need to go back and understand what was the root cause of this issue. And we need to kind of reevaluate, okay, what is the international position that countries have taken for the last 30, 40 years, right? Having to do with the two-state solution, both living side by side peacefully, according to the 67 borders. Canada accepts this, the US, a majority of the European countries. And unfortunately, that conversation has been lost. And Canada itself recognizes the occupied territories. Right? The United Nations recognize the occupied territories, and occupied basically means there's occupation, and Canada recognizes that. But the conversation around occupation has been totally lost. And I think it needs to be brought back because we need to better understand, how did we get here in the first place? And how are we going to get out of it? Because this thing does not have a military solution. This will need to be resolved politically, and it will need to be resolved at the table. Any other way, it will just not cut it. It'll just unfortunately mean more suffering for innocent people.
And it will need the support of nations who want to support the right conduct on both sides. It will need that kind of discipline. Something that Ali mentioned and all of you guys are talking about in terms of trauma, and forgive me, I'm getting excited, so I keep moving around on this thing. But one of the things I will share with you is that one of the strengths, I think, of this country is what has happened with regard to the indigenous population. And what I mean by that is, this is one of the few colonized countries where the colonizers stayed, or the multiple colonizers, right? And because of that kind of, where they were sort of waves smashing against each other for a while, and the traumas that went along with it as people who were in the residential schools, etc. I don't know how well you might know of this in the United States, but I think that story is coming out as well in the States. And for a long, long time, the prevailing attitude of people who were close to indigenous people was, they're a bunch of drunks, they're a bunch of violent people, they don't know how to be parents, these are animal savages. But then, as more and more the listening, the stories, the research, the respect has happened, we begin to see what the effects of trauma is on populations. And also, though, we've begun to see the indigenous populations of this country begin to also, as they become more aware, they find leadership within themselves and the capacity within themselves to work with each other and with partners to say, let us find ways now to heal. And it's going to take a while. And what I fear about with Palestine or Gaza and the whole area is people might look at 5 years or 10, look at these people. They're beating each other, they're drunks, they're whatever it might be, violence, and fail to understand their reasons why. In the end, when harm is visited upon people, you don't necessarily have the opportunity to resist that. And you end up taking that harm out on the people who are closest to you, on your own families. And I say this because not only with indigenous populations, but again, I'll refer back to Trinidad, where I'm from. And I used to make a joke many years ago that there's no Carib in the Caribbean, and I'll explain that. Carib was one of the indigenous tribal groups that once lived there, but the Spanish enslaved and murdered them, and the final remnants all committed suicide, right? The Taino, the Siboney, all these people. And then they brought Africans, and then they brought Indians, and then they brought Chinese, and oppression and repression and depression. What did it mean? I think back to my own so-called, I'll say Indian, because there was once something much larger than you guys may know called India that we are from, which is almost 200 years ago from that landmass. And certainly within that community, there was alcoholism and violence and all that. And it took me a while when I heard these stories or read about it to begin to understand, well, yeah, there are reasons, right? And so that's my greatest fear about what's going on with Palestine, that those coals are going to start fires in each generation. And unless we're able to partner with these victims, not just them, but literally all over the world, people who are facing incredible and enormous injustice, how we can heal these people. It's very difficult. And to Shanta's point, and maybe somebody's earlier point, the healed versus the unhealed. But in the end, even the healed are still working to maintain that all the time. And it's hard work, right? We have to find ways to treat each other kindly and beautifully every day for it to work.
It's been, great shares from all of you. Thank you so much. I feel like humanity right now is at such a point where back in the day, we've had all of these, like Peter is saying, historically, colonialism and apartheid states and wars and everything. But now in the modern day, how it's coming up. It's coming up in a form of propaganda as well, in the form where there is coercive manipulation of emotions of people who haven't healed, of people's traumas. There is social media that anything can go viral. Everyone has a voice. So it's such different times for humanity where we have never seen this type of a challenge before. And so it's just perpetuating the whole situation. And the people who have the control can maneuver that to their agenda. And so I think it's a real time for reform and awakening for all of us to do that critical thinking that Peter was saying. It is so important that comes to that when you have two sides of something, or when you have so much information coming at you from so many different channels, to be able to make that decision of what is right and what is right for humanity in general. So, I feel like we are really, really at a point where it's just such a big challenge.
It is. And I think this event has really opened our eyes to how do we communicate with each other? How can I relate to you knowing that you support one side or the other? I totally oppose it. And that's the biggest wedge right now. So discernment and critical thinking, I think, right now is highly needed. What are some steps our listeners or viewers can take right now to step into humanity? What are your suggestions? Something small that they could do right this moment.
If I could jump in, I think one thing people can do, and I think this also goes back to the vigil or any other opportunities where where two different people or three different people or more come together, right? And they have a disagreement. I think when we meet as people, the conversation is just different. When you're on social media, it's a total different, it allows people to be their sometimes worst self, right? So I think one thing that people can do, and your listeners can do, is whatever they're consuming in terms of social media and news media, right? Please turn over to the other side. So there must be whether you're listening to left-leaning or right-leaning or whoever, right? So look at the other side, and you will find oftentimes that some of the stories that get missed, they're just completely not on one side and they're shown on the other side. So so people end up living sort of in a very polarized way. In echo chambers where, the views they already possess are never challenged because they keep hearing the same views, which reinforce them, right? So they get to a point where they feel they have the truth, right? But in reality, it's not the truth. It's a facade. It's their version of the truth. And on the other side, you might have the same thing. So that's why when people actually come together, so many misconceptions are clarified, right? So many misunderstandings are put aside because you realize, hey, the conversation needed to be different. So yeah, I think people can start to consume other news media from the other side, read books from the other side, cultural stuff, attend, maybe engage an organization that is in your area, and just have a conversation, have a coffee with them, and just go there just with a listening ear and ask questions. And hopefully that'll start something where people can build on.
Yeah, no, I think, Ali, you were spot on. At the end of the day, it's all about education. And that's what I've always said. And I tell all the kids that I empower, education is the key. Reading, watching completely different news broadcasts. Don't ever stick to one. And I tell that to all my friends still every day. Don't just watch one. Get the whole gist of the story. And the best thing that we can do, to be honest, is not take sides, but to think about all the civilians at the end of the day, all the people that are hurting, right? For me, hosting a peace vigil that brought people of all walks of life out. That's what's important. It's important to be with the community and give the community the opportunity to come together, to see that there are people from every side that care about each other at the end of the day. At the end of the day, we all care. We care about peace. I think we don't realize how fragile it can be until we see things like this unfolding. And I think the more opportunities there are for people to be seen and to be able to come together and share in their fears and their sadness, and just have people of other faiths and other walks of life there to show comfort and show humanity and empathy and understanding is important. But education is key for sure.
Yeah, I love the question. Because I think there's still so much more work to do, and I'm excited because and I hope I say everything I need to say in this section. And one is that I think it's become painfully clear that so many of our political leaders do not possess the capacity or the will to make decisions based on research, facts, history, legal documents. They're not. And therefore, it behooves everyone listening to this and everyone to get out there and meet people and do what they can to make the world a better place. That is the job. I'm trying to make the world a better place for my children and my friends and family, and for me too. Second, I think there's something very much to be said about reading. There's nothing that we can get from mainstream media that isn't one-sided or deliberately silent about certain issues. I think there's much to be said about reading books about what Palestine might have been in the 30s and 40s and 50s in the same way that Iraq was. I'll bring the audience's attention to a book that I read many years ago. It's called How to Read Television. It was written by two university professors from New York University, actually. And in it, the opening chapter is about the war with Iraq. And in it said that Saddam Hussein actually asked permission of the United States via the Secretary of State at the time, Madeleine Albright, if they could teach Kuwait a lesson. And the reason was that Kuwait had been underselling the oil, so it does show even the Middle East cares about capitalism and profits, under OPEC or whatever it was, because it was deliberately underselling the oil its prices beneath what they'd all agreed on to whomever, probably to the US or whomever. And the response was, what you do in the Middle East is your business. And then boom, Saddam tries to teach Kuwait a lesson, and next thing you know, bam. And then books came out about what Iraq looked like in the 1930s and 40s. Jazz, cafes, people drinking wine. It was an open society. And when people are treated badly, the pendulums swings again. And we have to think about Palestine and other countries in the same way. Everywhere people thirst for freedom, everywhere people thirst for knowledge, everywhere people thirst for conviviality and happiness. And so that's another thing I'm going to say that people need to do: read books. And maybe the third thing is we need to get out there anyway and do our own vigils and do our own walking with people and meeting them, because we cannot trust the mainstream media or the politicians to stand up and say, to do anything that will make this progress meaningfully towards peace.
If I may just quickly add, it connects to what I said earlier and what Shanta and Peter said. I think in simple terms, I think for me, at least I've tried to do that, is basically make truth your highest value, right? So when you're searching the news, when you're reading the news, when you're having a conversation, when you're confronting your own background knowledge that you already possess, et cetera, make truth your highest value, right? As opposed to, no, I need to be right. Or as opposed to, no, this is what I was taught. Or no, this is, whatever it might be. No, sometimes it's very painful stories, if you will, which you realize with time that they're not actually accurate. I can think of a couple of stories where I was growing up from a political national perspective. It was like, hey, we won this war, and only to realize we didn't, right? But basically, make truth your highest value and forget about the rest. So if you're shooting for that and that's your North Star, I think you'll find your way. But don't get distracted with shiny objects because, hey, this presentation of this person was such and such, et cetera, et cetera. I think those are just distractions. But truth shall set you free, as they say.
Still a question about truth. So our listeners know what the context of truth is. So are we talking facts being the truth? When we're reading, there's a lot of history, we have information, or I just want to understand truth better.
Yeah, that's a good question. Hopefully Peter will be able to add, or Shanta. But I think truth, for me, in simple terms, I think there is such thing as an objective truth, right? And it depends on what you're talking about. At least in the political world, you can get to, for the most part, if you do your research, if you listen to both sides, you can get to a place where you may not get to 100% of the truth, but you can get pretty close, right? So I think truth is a bit of a mirage. So, it's kind of like when you're going down the highway on a hot summer day and you see a puddle of water right in front of you. And the closer you get, the farther it gets. But you see it, you know that's what you have to kind of strive for. So truth for me, in a sense, it is a bit of a mirage, but it doesn't mean it's not reality, right? Because it's a mirage because, in my opinion, you probably not be able to get to it. Now, somebody else may say when somebody who believes in objective truth, 2 + 2 = 4, and you can prove that, and there's mathematical equations, right? So, but I think politically and culturally, it's a little more difficult to do that. But I think what truth means is, does this story that I know or this view that I have reconcile with the facts on the ground, right? That's one way. But if others have a better answer, maybe.
Maybe just another answer. I think I would equate truth with honesty. And there are many facts that can be put in you put any master's students or BA students together in the art of persuasion, or any politician together, whomever they are. Trump could sound very, very truthful to people because he'll give you certain kinds of facts that you want to hear. But I think this is where, again, we talk about critical thinking skills. The objective of learning is really about looking at different facts, looking at different dates, looking at what things have been said and done, and finding meaning in it that is as close to, as Ali said, objective truth, which is honesty. And then maybe the other layer is, how does this make the world better? How does it, politically speaking, what is the role of government? What is the role of a leader, if not to create the common good or serve the common good of the people, all of the people, not just, and again, we'll do a little thing here based on Ontario, not just your rich friends, right? So that is part of the concern. But the other part of the concern is you got to ask yourself, okay, approximately 1,000 or 1,500 dead, approximately 18,000 dead, many of whom are babies after the fact, and children and elderly, and the ill, and hospitals. So yes, you have every right to some sort of retribution, an eye for an eye, but that ain't just the eye. If you go in Old Testament, which is what we've tried to get past, right? That's every stinking finger, baby toes, the navel, and the innards. So, we need to look at what is, this is where people who have power, in this case, the United States and apparently Britain, are the only two, and they need to be able to exercise some form of common sense. This is what my concern is. So truth is an honest life, and it should be about integrity and honor. And I despise people who keep using those words out there, or worse for me, the kinds of people who I hear, oh my God, if I was living in Nazi Germany, you'd never see me doing that. Well, hell, we're living it now, and I don't see any leaders speaking out. We're living it right now, and people are losing their jobs or being censored or whatever, and that is not cool. Don't come to me later, or don't tell me about DEI, which is even more despicable. I care about inclusion and diversity. Well, this is your chance to speak out, folks. This is your chance to put it out there on your reels about what diversity and inclusion and equity is. Show me that degree meant something to you, right? But right now, I'm not seeing it. So that's why we are sharing the folks. Get out there, meet people, talk to people, read a book. It's okay to read still.
Amazing. Lots of things to put into action. I think in theory, we might know all of these things, but it's to take that small step, to pick up one book, to have one conversation, to light one candle, to offer 1 minute of silence, and just invite others to join you, which is what you all did, which is so amazing. And so as we wind down, you've given great advice on steps to take. What is a message you would like to leave for the listeners?
I would say is, at the end of the day, we are all different, but at the end of the day, we're all the same. And if each of us could just reach out a hand of friendship just to one person, somebody we don't necessarily know, I think that just brings so much hope and joy and gratitude to that other person. But the amount of joy you get back in return is doubled. And that's what I would say. Just reach out a hand to somebody different, somebody new, somebody that is hurting. It doesn't necessarily have to be from, the issue we're talking about today. Anybody that is hurting. That's what I would say.
I was speaking to Ali about something a short while ago, about something completely different than this. And it occurred to me that if you look at all of us here on this panel, we all look brown, and we are, and very happily so. But Shanta is from Singapore, and Ali, I believe your family is from Pakistan.
Yes.
And I'm from Trinidad. And you guys have two separate stories, and one of you is in Canada and one of you is in the US. We are not the same. I will venture that maybe we all like curry, but that's about it. Maybe not. I could even be wrong about that. So what I'm trying to say is there may be some commonalities to us all, but at the end of the day, we all have completely separate stories and histories and understandings of the world. And we cannot paint one group of people with the same paintbrush or the same color. It's not right. we know better. And so what I'm going to say to everyone is that, again, I'm really amazed and at the amount of people out there in the world, young people of all ages and all backgrounds, religious and cultural backgrounds and colors, who are out there asking for a ceasefire, asking for peace, asking for a different way to move forward in the world. That I'm amazed at, and I'm very proud of people, and I would ask more people to do it. Write letters, talk to your MPs, MPPs, MLAs, whatever you guys call your senators. What are they called down in the States again?
Representatives. Yeah.
Yeah, talk to these people. There are numbers. There are more people in Canada or in the US who are voters and who have money than there are people of the two particular ethnic groups involved. And these politicians need to understand that we are not interested in this kind of backwards village world anymore, right? We want people, if you're going to lead, then act like a leader. And at the end of the day, though, we can't wait for them. We have to take action. We can talk, but the world really still is about action. Action gets things done, and we can do it because we understand deep within ourselves there is a better way to do things.
I will just add a quotation I think I may have referenced before from the Holy Quran, which says that stand firm in justice, even if it is against yourself. And it connects with what I said earlier in terms of looking for the objective truth, if you will. And it allows us to put, people before politics. It sounds like a political slogan, and oftentimes it is. But I think if we kind of look into it a little more deeply and actually try to implement it and live it, I think that will be very helpful to put people before politics and really stand for justice, even if it is against yourself. Take action, be a leader in your own right, in your own community. Use your voice, use whatever is at your disposal. If you can write. If you can speak, but do whatever you must do to stand firm for justice and stand firm for what is right, because there's a famous quotation as well. If you don't basically speak up when they're coming after somebody else, so it's important for us to, I think, to do that, to stand for justice, and just realize at the end of the day, from a cosmic perspective, that we are just on this one planet in the middle of nowhere, just floating, right? And the sense of importance that we give to some things, it's important because we may be looking at it very closely. So if we kind of just zoom out a little bit, suddenly the importance, evaporates on most of the things. And what you're left with is very, very few things that I could probably count on one hand, right? And I think people who are close to death oftentimes have these experiences right before. They have these grudges, they have these views, and they have these, and yet on their deathbed, you ask them in their stories, what are your biggest regrets? And one of them is, in the face of death, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. So that's kind of what I would say, is just stand for justice and just keep a perspective on things. Not everything is as important as it looks. And the ones that are really important, definitely worth striving for.
It's been amazing to have you, really. A warm and thoughtful and mind-opening conversation. Where can our listeners and viewers find you if they wanted to reach out?
For me, I'm on Facebook, so Ali Chatha, ALICHATHA, and I'm also on Instagram at IM_Ali Chatha.
And yourself, Peter?
Pete Deboran at yahoo.com. I'm on Facebook too. Doesn't mean I'm on it all the time, but I'm there.
And how about you, Shanta?
Yeah. I'm on Facebook, and it's Shanta Sundarason.
That's truly, truly amazing listening to all three of you. Thank you so much for sharing. And it's so inspiring to hear how you guys came to this and what you guys are doing and all of the solutions that you have explained so very, very well in this episode. I think that if each of us go out and do even a little bit of what we can do, it will make a big difference. So truly inspiring. Thank you so much. And we are grateful to have people like you in this world who are actually going out and making a difference right now.
Yeah. One last question. What's next? Is there something that is in the works that you would like to share with us?
The only thing I can share at this point, we want to do something locally in Markham next month and sort of invite the community and invite some of our local politicians, and maybe in the context of the new year, in the context of a new beginning, but also share with them as individuals, give the politicians and other people an opportunity just to speak, and for others to hear each other and talk things out. So that's one of the things we are definitely doing. But quite frankly, the other is, for my part, like the others as well, I'm highly political. I do belong to a particular political party that's just had a major leadership change here, and I know that they will be going to a policy convention at some point in the new year. And I want to do my part to be able to bring some policy ideas up, not necessarily about that, because this is provincial, and the idea of what's happening in Palestine and Israel, the Sudan, so many other places in the world is really a federal matter and an international matter. But this is where I have the opportunity. And so I want to be able to do my part in, again, trying to make the world better, to make it a more just and fair place.
I think we have we got something specific planned, like another peace vigil? No, not at this moment. I think we're waiting with bated breath to see what happens next. If there is a need to organize something again, it will happen. We do things very, very quickly. So we will certainly keep you posted if there is something similar, for sure.
One thing that I'm currently involved in is working on putting together a civic engagement program for youth, working with 2 organizations locally to basically educate youth, really empower them on the basics of civic engagement in terms of what it is, why it's important, and then also equipping them with some of those skills that they can use to actually exercise that civic and participate civically, right? So public speaking, right? And maybe how to contact, your member of parliament, how to advocate on a particular issue, how to speak to, somebody else on a particular issue, especially if it's a sensitive one, how to speak to the media, et cetera, et cetera. But really, it's intended to be an instructional program and also a hands-on program to really help youth get engaged, because even in this issue, a lot of youth have been at the forefront of it, and they're really passionate about this issue, because this generation is a little different. They do care about what is right and what is wrong. They do see behind the screen as well. They're really good at seeing that, and so that's kind of one thing that I'm currently engaged in.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, everyone. I look forward to maybe seeing you again, maybe at a peace vigil in New Jersey.
And we wanted to make an announcement that we would like to do an online vigil and invite people from New Jersey and from Toronto and other places in the world. And we would love for you to join. And we'll be sending out the details in the next few days.
Excellent idea.
Thank you.
Thank you for giving us that inspiration.
Thank you so much for this opportunity and for giving us an opportunity to talk like this. We don't often get a chance to have this kind of conversation with each other, so it's been fantastic. Much appreciated.
Absolutely. Yes,
Definitely.
absolutely. Thank you so much to both of you, and thank you for having us and giving us this opportunity.
Pleasure. So, Sana, it's that time of our episode.
Yep.
We're
Two Daisy Girls.
Reinventing cultural norms.
With love.
Bye.
Bye.
See you
Bye-bye.
next time.
Everybody.
Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed today's episode.
Please rate, subscribe, and review wherever you listen to podcasts, and follow the Rabia and Sana Show on social medias.
Remember, you can watch the video version on YouTube, and don't forget to share, like, and subscribe.
If you want life coaching services, or you are reinventing cultural norms for yourself and think you would be a great guest and want to be on our show, please email contact@therabiaandsanashow.com.
And be sure to check out our next episode. See you next time.